All right.
Excuse me.
Well, you want to go ahead and get started? Janice, do you want to say something about the conservation through art?
Sure. So this wilderness webinar is part of our Conservation Through Art 50 Years of Wilderness in Alabama initiative. And last year, and also part of 2023, our Conservation Through Art initiative was about the eastern hemlock forests, and we were educating people through art and through events and workshops about the importance of the eastern hemlock ecosystem and the threat to it by the hemlock woolly adelgid. But this year, this is the 50th anniversary of the Eastern Wilderness Act that gave us all three wilderness areas in Alabama: Sipsey Wilderness first, then the Chiaha Wilderness, and then the Duggar Mountain Wilderness. So we are celebrating that and educating about it through our Conservation Through Art series. And this during the month of April, which is Earth Month, we have an exhibit up at Talladega College in the Harvey Museum of Art. It's a show of 10 artists, photographers, painters, and a bookmaker, and also writers from the college under the guidance of Ann Bailey and Professor Rochelle Williams. All the work is on display in that museum, and all this work is by artists who have a relationship with wilderness in Alabama. And so in addition to the exhibit in this beautiful museum, we're offering forest bathing walks, painting workshops, hikes in the wilderness areas, and Anne is leading the Writing the Wild aspect of this exhibit and leading writing workshops, as she will be doing tomorrow and on the Talladega College campus. So this we're just educating and talking about why wilderness is so important and how these lands in Alabama came to be wilderness. So with that, I will turn it back to Kim. Unless Anne, would you like to say something, introduce yourself, and talk a little bit about the Writing the Wild program?
Hi there.
Hello.
I just got out of my car, so I'm sorry I don't have my camera on. Hold on, let me see if I can get it on. Let's see. Is it on? No.
Not yet.
Okay, well, I don't mean to be a pain here.
You're not a pain, Anne.
Oh, okay, here. Hey.
Yay.
There you are.
I'm Ann Bailey, and I'm super excited to be working with Wild Alabama on this year's Conservation Through Art initiative, and really glad that the State Council of the Arts is as pumped up as we are and gave us a nice grant for the 2025 initiative. We're the whole month of April is with Talladega College as a base, kind of a home base where the art exhibit's happening. And the Writing the Wild program is an exploration of both the internal landscape of wilderness, if you will, of what it is to be your authentic self and to express that in combination with connecting to the world, nature, also called the more than human world, that is where we find ourselves in this life. So through connecting with nature, then we move into a writing process with prompts, helping the students to explore what is it to be a human in the wild, internally and externally. So really excited to be working with the students and with Rochelle Williams. She's awesome.
Thank you, Anne. Y'all have produced some really amazing work.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Fun, very fun.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so again, I'm Kim Waits, Wilderness Stewardship Coordinator, and the presentation that we are going to watch tonight, Janice had asked me to do a presentation, and I'd also recently been asked to give a talk for the Alabama Environmental Council for their Green Drinks Night, and instead of doing a outlined talk per se, I decided to take some footage that was given to me or shared with me that is about 52 or 3 years old. It was filmed, it's raw footage that was filmed in the Sipsey Wilderness, or soon to be. It was part of the effort to get some exposure and bring some visibility to the area when they were pushing for the legislation to protect the Sipsey Wilderness. And basically what happened was the reel-to-reel was digitized last fall and uploaded to a YouTube as a YouTube video. And then I took the YouTube video and spliced it down, downloaded and spliced it, and turned it into the presentation that I'm about to share with y'all. It was a labor of love. I'm calling it my love letter to the Sipsey Wilderness. And Janice, it would be wonderful to hear your voice read the slides as they come through. I did that last week at the Green Drinks talk, so it'd be nice to hear somebody different. So it's going to run for about 9 minutes. It's actually a 20-minute long video, but the first 9 minutes is the meat and potatoes of the presentation, and then the final 11 minutes is just raw footage that I won't get us to sit through this evening, but you can take that link and look at it later if you like, or at another time. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And oh, forget about that map that y'all see. Okay.
The area we now know as the Sipsey Wilderness was not a wilderness untouched by human hands. For thousands of years, it was home to indigenous peoples who shaped its physical landscape and imbued it with cultural and spiritual significance. February 3rd, 1914, the National Forest Reservation Commission authorized the creation of the Alabama Purchase Unit, encompassing 150,000 acres of forested land in Lawrence, Winston, and Franklin counties. This was a pivotal moment in establishing the Alabama National Forest, renamed Black Warrior Forest in 1936, and then Bankhead National Forest in 1942, which would eventually play a key role in the development of the Sipsey Wilderness, a haven for conservation and recreation. In 1950, the Bee Branch was officially designated as the Bee Branch Scenic Area, following a report titled A Proposed Botanical and Scenic Area, prepared by the forest supervisor and staff. The area's natural beauty, particularly its old-growth poplars, captured the attention of conservationists. In 1962, the Bee Branch Research Natural Area, RNA, was set aside to protect its unique natural features, including its diverse flora and fauna, and to serve as a baseline for understanding natural ecological processes. By designating this area as an RNA, the Forest Service ensured that it would remain largely untouched by human activity, allowing scientists to study natural phenomena without the influence of human management or disturbance. Dean was a passionate conservationist and one of the early advocates for protecting Alabama's natural landscapes. He played a key role in the establishment and preservation of the Sipsey Wilderness, particularly in promoting the area's ecological value. Wilderness saves the flora and fauna which we do not yet have the knowledge to understand or the wisdom to appreciate. These gene pools may carry the inheritance which we must have in the future to breed survival values back into our soils, plants, and animals. To destroy this area would be like burning a library before any of the books were read or even cataloged. Mary Burks. All nature is fine-tuned in harmony. You can predict one thing by watching another. Watching the blooms of the dogwoods, you know when the suckers will start their upstream run to spawn. Watching the suckers run, you know when the folks will come to fish. Smiling faces, fish, and standing on a rock in the middle of nowhere. That is what wilderness is all about. Jim Manasco. The Alabama Conservancy, now known as the Alabama Environmental Council, launched an effort in the late 1960s to protect the Sipsey area from increasing threats of development and logging. Recognizing its unique ecological and scenic value, the group began organizing public support, leading hikes, and lobbying decision makers to establish the Sipsey Wild Area, a critical step toward the area's eventual designation as wilderness. The campaign to protect the Sipsey area soon merged with a broader movement to preserve wild lands in the east. These combined efforts culminated in the passage of the Eastern Wilderness Act of 1975, which established 16 wilderness areas across the region, including the Sipsey Wilderness, marking a major milestone in American conservation history.
Oh man, I could sit there and watch that. I think I've watched it. It says 162 views, 140 of those are me, I think. No, just kidding. I'm gonna put a link to that in the chat if anybody wants to finish watching it later. I love the way this video just slows you down, like my whole being just kind of comes in tune with that. So now I need to stop where my stuff. Okay, there I am. Stop share. Um,
The
so,
rest of the video is very dreamy. Well, it's all very dreamy, and
Yeah.
it's really lovely.
yeah. Um, and everything just worked out so perfectly with that, and the timing of it was impeccable, and I was very fortunate to find the free audio in the program that was on my Windows. I just searched through all the free sound bites and I found that, and all the other ones were horrible. They were just didn't even fit, and that was one just fit perfectly. Um, so I guess if anybody has any questions about the um history of the Sipsey Wilderness, I mean, basically in a nutshell, the importance was recognized early on by not only the agency but the people that loved it, and they knew of the Wilderness Act of 1964, and they wanted to bring wilderness, or the concept of wilderness, to the East, in the Eastern United States, because most people think of wilderness as these greater landscapes out west. And what happened when the bill was introduced, um, or the idea was introduced locally to the forest ranger, there was a pushback by the agency because they said that the lands were already picked over with logging roads and human development, and that a piece of land that had the imprint of man could not be wilderness. But then that circled around through different channels, and even some larger organizations like the Sierra Club and the Isaac Walton League were saying that they were pushing against wilderness in the East for those purity doctrine, they called it. But it was actually Senator Frank Church that pointed out the fact that there were actually 3 wilderness areas already in the East that came along with the Wilderness Act of 1964, and that was Shining Rock, Linville Gorge, and Savage Gulf. So just pointing that out, it made that case that there could be wilderness in the East. And there was, well, the Alabama Conservancy had been to Washington, and Senator Sparkman had put out the bill, and they were calling it the Sipsey Wild Area. But simultaneously, there was also an effort to Senator George Aiken, I believe it was, had put in a bill for Dolly Sod's Wilderness. I may be wrong. I think that's what it was. I don't have any notes in front of me. But essentially, the point is there was also another movement for Eastern Wilderness. So they were encouraged to kind of retract that Sipsey Wild bill and merge the efforts together, and then repropose it as the Eastern Wilderness Areas Act. Well, one little minute technicality is the fact that it never really got a title. Usually when you submit a bill, they'll have like a short title. Somehow that got skipped over, so it's really technically just Public Law 93-622, and it's informally called the Eastern Wilderness Areas Act. So when that actual act was passed, that brought 16 wilderness areas, new wilderness areas to the east, and that included the Sipsey, and Dolly Sods, plus 14 others I couldn't rattle off from memory, but that set the precedent for Eastern Wilderness and for it to grow. So have a great local source of pride in Alabama for that respect. And then so that's kind of our baseline for when we say 50 years of wilderness in Alabama, because it started with that Eastern Wilderness Areas Act. And then fast forward to additional wilderness areas. We had Cheaha in 1983, Cheaha Wilderness. And that was, how can I put it in a nutshell? It started with they were going to build a road that was going to interfere with the 11-mile long Odom Scout Trail, which is now only 4 miles. That's a story in itself. It was rebuilt, and the Pinhoti got a part of those miles, and they moved the actual trail bed off of the ridge. But so that was Cheaha Wilderness. And then in 1988, Cheaha and Sipsey both were expanded. There was the act, the Alabama Additions Act, which doubled the size of the Sipsey Wilderness. Originally, it was 12,000 acres in 1975. The 1988 Act doubled the Sipsey Wilderness, added some acreage to the Chiahaw Wilderness, and it established the Sipsey Fork as our only wild and scenic river. And then Duggar Mountain Wilderness was 1999, and that started with efforts with Bruce and Francine Hutchinson, Pete Conroy, and Pat Byington were part of those efforts. I'm sure there were more. And yeah, so that we have a rich history in Alabama of wilderness. And we're super proud of that. So I'm going to hush my mouth. And what do I have here? Anne says, how is wilderness different from national forest? So that's a great question. So, and it's a lot to unpack. So wilderness, it being an idea and a place. I was listening to a podcast this morning that came out with Wild Idea Podcast, and I think it was Greg Applett from Wilderness Society had said that wilderness is not only it's an idea and a place in tandem. It's place-based, but it's also a human construct that we have created as a place that we leave to its own volition to act upon its own will. And that it's nature's will is greater than the will of humans. And with capital W wilderness, in the legislation of the Wilderness Act of 1964, wilderness is different from national forests in that it receives the highest level of federal protection. No actions can be taken without going through some type of iterative process to think about wilderness character as the main, that you can only take an action if it is preserving wilderness character. What is wilderness character? And that is a something that wasn't clearly defined in the Wilderness Act of 1964. It was more of an interpretation, and what components of wilderness character. And that in a nutshell is that a wilderness is untrammeled, meaning that the biotic community is not restrained. Rivers run free, and actions are not suppressed. Fire is generally not suppressed. Natural, it being natural conditions as defined as, they like to think of that as pre-colonial conditions, and opportunity for primitive and unconfined recreation, where a person is allowed a space to have a wilderness experience where they are in control of their destiny, and it promotes self-reliance. And then undeveloped is another component of wilderness character, where buildings, roads will not be built. Buildings, hardened campsites, and what else? Untrammeled, natural, primitive, and unconfined recreation, undeveloped, and then other features of value. If it applies to that particular wilderness area, other features of value refers to, it could be cultural significance, it could be endangered species that are in that wilderness. And those components of wilderness character are kind of like parts of a violin. It's like if you mess with one, you can't have the rest of it. It sort of unravels. And we the goal is for wilderness areas to trend in a way that it is returning back to a natural state. Now, of course, they won't ever completely 100%, but if we can keep that trend going towards its natural state instead of away from it, then that's kind of the ultimate goal of wilderness management. Ann Bailey says, so that protection is for in perpetuity. That well, certain things can challenge that. I mean, that it is in theory, but at the same time, as with certain administrations, we cannot guarantee that an act of Congress is going to stay fortified, and that just takes people expressing to representatives, Congress, etc., and to other people, sharing the message of wilderness, and how important it is that we have places that are managed in that respect, with respect to other initiatives as well. So perpetuity is ideal, but it's never guaranteed.
And I would add to that a federal wilderness area has the highest level of protection of all federal public lands.
Yes. Um, and it's literally an act of Congress. So the Wilderness Act of 1964 was unanimous. I believe in the House, and then Senate, there was enough in the Senate to push it forward. But it's testimony to the idea that people on both sides supported that we need spaces, and it's not just for the land itself, it's for hunters and fishermen and conservationists, people for recreation, or I like to say sometimes that to recreate is to recreate, because you're kind of recreating yourself in a sense when we recreate. It is a space where we go, and we're not the 9 to 5 person that we might be on Monday through Friday. We're to our own devices and away from that. So, what else? Are there restrictions for camping in the wilderness? So it depends on which wilderness. Um, because when we look at the Wilderness Act, it gives you a kind of a baseline of this, that, and do's and don'ts and whatnot. Um, but then when it comes down to a specific wilderness, I'll use the Sipsey, for example, and then I'll give you an example of another one that's managed a little differently. So in the Sipsey Wilderness, there aren't necessarily any restrictions for camping. Um, the best practice is that you practice leave no trace. You use you find what's the saying? A good campsite is found and not made. So you camp somewhere where somebody has already camped before. They're not designated campsites. They're just places that have popped up over time, and but they're not agency restricted, like you have to go to the ranger station and they give you, okay, you're going to go camp at campsite number 33 on trail 209. You're at your own, you walk in, and if one's occupied, you have to go to the next one. That's the way the Sipsey Wilderness is. Boundary waters, on the other hand, yes, you have to have a permit, and they actually have some hardened campsites that where there is a little pit toilet, there's a fire ring. There's maybe a little place to hang your lantern or whatever, but that decision was made by land management because they deemed that if they did not do that, wilderness character was going to degrade so badly that it would not, you just, it couldn't be considered wilderness anymore, I guess. So there are certain wilderness areas where they have gone through a certain process and deemed that we've got to have some restrictions or put people in places so that wilderness character as a whole will be protected. It hasn't gotten to that point in the Sipsey Wilderness, but I think it will in time because there are 147 campsites in our inventory for that area, and they're all highly degraded and they're getting bigger and bigger over time. So some places, they have restrictions where there's no campfires. Like I know there's a fire ban year round, 24/7 in Shining Rock Wilderness. And sometimes they use those kinds of restrictions as a visitor management tool. Like some people will stay out of the wilderness because they can't have a campfire. They're like, well, we're just not going to go there because, you know, can't have a campfire. So, any other, what else? I mean, I could ramble on all night long about this subject. What do the wilderness rangers do? So, Anne, are you referring to Wild Alabama's volunteer wilderness rangers? Hey, Janice, why don't I'd like because you were around and helped start that program originally many, many moons ago, if you'd like to take that one.
Sure. So back in about 2010 or so, while at the state of all three wilderness areas in Alabama had one Forest Service wilderness ranger for all three areas. And the Forest Service realized that this was a problem, that this was a real deficit of rangers who could be out there in wilderness areas to patrol and to be available to people and to just keep an eye on the things that were happening in the wilderness areas. So Wild Alabama, at that time we were Wild South, was asked to partner with the Forest Service in creating a volunteer wilderness ranger program. So we did that. And this was to provide rangers for wilderness areas, whereas the Forest Service could not. So the wilderness rangers that we trained did everything that a Forest Service wilderness ranger could do except for law enforcement. So our program was modeled on the really well-established wilderness ranger program in Colorado called the Poudre Mountain Wilderness Rangers. And Mark Kalinsky, who was working with us at that time, went out and trained with the Poudre Mountain Wilderness Rangers just to see what their program was like and how they taught. And he brought all that information and knowledge back to Alabama. And so through 2010 and 2011, we developed the program, Wild South Volunteer Wilderness Rangers. And this was in partnership with the Forest Service. In the early days, they took a more active role in our trainings. And that has kind of changed all the over time, and now it's almost entirely Wild Alabama that does the trainings, but with Forest Service input. So 2011, in October, we had our first batch of volunteer wilderness rangers in the Sipsey Wilderness. And then we also did trainings in the Talladega National Forest for the Chiaha Wilderness and Duggar Mountain Wilderness areas. And so that's a program that's still going strong. Lindsay and Kim head up that program now, and we have some very dedicated volunteers who are wilderness rangers. And some of the things that the wilderness rangers do is mainly to interact with the people who are in the wilderness, so they can they talk about leave no trace principles and promote leave no trace principles heavily. They're available in case of emergencies or any kind of need that arises, which does happen. They do light trail maintenance and pick up trash. And so a ranger patrol is basically just like a long hike with a ranger partner, where they're just interacting with the people who are out in the wilderness area and doing things to help preserve wilderness character, such as cleaning up campsites and doing trail work. And it's a great program, and it's really helped our wilderness areas a lot. I mean, having witnessed this for so long, it is very clear that this program has made great improvements in the impacts of visitors on the wilderness areas.
That's very true. I mean, we've had people say that they've noticed a difference over the years, the cleanliness. And it's, studies have shown that when people see that others are loving and stewarding and taking care of a place, then they're more likely to do the same. It's not just a piece of land that you go to and sit in the woods and do whatever. I mean, it brings it alive and makes it a more three-dimensional experience when you know that there are people that feel so passionately about a place.
Really does.
Has Alabama Wilderness been affected by national USFS employee firings? And says, um, so not not directly here on the ground, because here on the Bankhead they lost one employee. She has been rehired, thank goodness. But now here we stand, though they probably they're about to let go of about a third of its workforce. That's and it's probably going to be a lot of the people, the ologists, biologists, archaeologists, whatever, soil scientists, whatever, people that are hired to do stuff like implement NEPA, do monitoring, because they are finding ways to circumvent that right now. So probably we'll just leave it at that for now. Um, and if it will affect wilderness if they do a reduction in force. I'll just put it to you that way and leave that for another discussion. Sometimes we get the question, would there ever be more wilderness in Alabama? It would, I would love to see that happen, and I can share my vision of how that would look. But it would literally take an effort of people and just it would take a lot of time. So basically, oh, in the 90s, I want to say, or a little in the late 90s, the Wilderness Society did a publication called Alabama's Mountain Treasures. And that publication had has several uh tracts of land in Alabama with proposed land designations, like, because there's not only wilderness, there's scenic areas, there's national monument, or just whatever land designation they think would be appropriate for a certain area of land. So there were three, at least three, I want to say, proposed wilderness areas, and then an addition to the Sipsey Wilderness, like an expansion to take the last 5 or 7 thousand acres in the northwest stretches of that, south of the Tennessee Divide, in the Thompson and Tedford Creek watershed, that area. Basically, if that expansion were to happen, we'd have the entire headwaters of the Sipsey Fork watershed. And then in the east, in the Talladega area, there was Rebecca Mountain. Shoot, I don't remember off the top of my head. There were like three places in that area that were proposed wilderness. They were not wilderness areas that sometimes you see them in a land and resource management plan for the Forest Service. They weren't in there, and they don't have to be. When it comes to wilderness, they don't technically have to be in a proposed wilderness by the Forest Service or anything. But because this study was done 30 years ago, approximately, if that was revisited, we would have to ground truth these places, especially the places in Talladega, because I think of like some of these mountains, probably like Rebecca Mountain or other places, over time they might have more development on them. They might have cell phone towers. I mean, who knows what has happened on those tracts of land in the last 30 years. So literally somebody would have to get out maps, go ground truth the area, walk the area, and compare and update and document what they're seeing on the ground, and then think about, is it really suitable, or it's just like a feasibility study. I mean, is it feasible that we could take those and then talk to the right senators or representatives and see if we can draft a bill or find some other bill to sandwich it into, or whatever. But I mean, it would be very hard right now in this current climate. My philosophy right now is we need to stick and steward the wilderness areas that we already have. Not that there can't be new ones, but we need to focus on what we have now, and advocating for the proper management of not just the wilderness areas, but our entire federal lands, period. So,
So love your wilderness,
yes.
love your wild places, and talk about it and make art about them and write about them.
Hmm.
Just
Bring visibility to that love and that passion. Because when you show somebody that you can be passionate about that, it inspires them to be as well. And it's not just a place. I mean, wilderness is not just an idea, it's an exercise in humility and restraint. Like it translates to other things in our lives, and it teaches us to just not put yourself first, not put the will of humans first. I mean, can we think of land in the sense of it has its own will and volition, that's an inherent right that is just as equally important as we as humans have.
It has its own life.
It does.
It is its own life.
Well, all right, we're 5 minutes to the top of the hour. If anybody wants to throw any more comments or questions, and before we roll off into whatever it is next in our life. I mean, for me, it's going to be snuggling up with my dog and going to sleep. It's already past my bedtime.
Well, I'd like to mention a couple of things we have coming up
Yeah.
in our Conservation Through Art series throughout the rest of this month, which is also Earth Month. Like we said, Anne has her Writing the Wild workshop at Talladega College tomorrow. And then on the last weekend of this month, which is on Saturday, the 26th, Anne and I will be leading forest bathing in either Duggar Mountain or Chiaha Wilderness over in the Talladega National Forest. And we'll open this first to Talladega College students and staff and faculty, and then we'll open it to the public. But if you're interested in that and want to go ahead and get on the list, we'll put you on the waiting list, and then you'll be notified if there's room. So we also have a plein air painting workshop on that same day that will be led by Timothy Joe, who is one of our board members, and that will be on the Talladega College campus as well. And then on the 26th, Kevin England will be leading a botanical hike in the Sipsey Wilderness for us. So this will probably be on the Thompson Creek Trail because it is just so spectacular this time of the year. And as you may know, Kevin is he's a botanist who has been volunteering with us for a very long time, and he's also a Wild Alabama board member. So Kevin's wildflower and botanical walks are just so interesting. And plus you get to be in some of the most beautiful places. So all of these things are listed on the events page on our website. And hope to see y'all out there soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome. Thank you, Kim.
You bet. Anybody else? Wrapping up, 2 minutes. Thank you, thank you. Love y'all. Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and do whatever it is. I'm gonna end the call.
Okay. Thanks,
All right.
everybody. Stay in
Y'all have a
touch.
good night.
Stay wild.
I'm gonna download the recording and I'll stick it in our YouTube and share it.
Great.
All right, y'all have a good night.
Good night, everybody.